Hi, Brian White is filling in for Buck Lavasser. Tonight we'll pay a visit to last summer for some smallmouth bass fishing on the Menominee River with an old friend.
Probably about a 17.5-inch fish, Menominee River summer smallmouth.
Then only in the UP. Old Ordock, Widowmaker, and Pickaxe Blonde are common names in the Keweenaw, and now becoming well known across the rest of the Upper Peninsula and beyond. We'll pay a visit to the Keweenaw Brewing Company in South Range. All that and more tonight on Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone, forest thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak, surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields, call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill, the eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of northern Michigan.
Tonight I get a chance to reflect back before discovering, back before real outdoors, back to where I started with a show called Fishing with Northwoods guide Mike Mladenik. Here's a little bit of what it looked like.
Welcome to Fishing with Northwoods guide Mike Mladenik, your guide for fishing the Northwoods.
I'm forever indebted to Mike for giving me the opportunity to film and produce his show when I had no experience and no qualifications. Mike and I spent a lot of time in a boat together and became good friends. Last summer I had the opportunity once again to get together with Mike and spend a day fishing and filming on the Menominee River.
Yeah, we're fishing on the Menominee River today. It's boundary water between Wisconsin and Michigan. Now I'm fishing primarily, we're fishing here for smallmouth bass, and the guiding I do on this river, about 95% of it is for smallmouth bass, and this is really a world-class smallmouth bass fishery, and people come from all over North America to fish on this river. But besides the smallmouth in here, you've got northern, you've got some largemouth bass, you've got walleye, you've got muskies, and not in this section of the river, but south a little bit, they have sturgeon. So it's got just about anything you can ask for. I start fishing smallmouth here right away, early May. The Wisconsin fishing season opens the first Saturday in May, so you can come down here, you know, and fish smallmouth. You can also fish walleye. May is fantastic smallmouth fish, gets a lot of big fish. Get into June, now we're fishing in summer, and we've had some pretty hot weather. We've had 90-degree, almost 100-degree temperatures, and anybody that fishes knows that's pretty tough fishing. I don't care where you go, but on a day like this, hot day in the middle of summer, we're still catching fish here on the Menominee River. Not the largest fish in the river, just an average one, but it's still just a light little tap. Not as big as he thought. I actually thought he was bigger, but go. Nice little average Menominee River smallmouth. There we go. Okay, we're going to start out today using my go-to favorite bait on the Menominee River. It's just a 4-inch. It's called a Case Magic Stick. I got a little O-ring on here, and what I do is I insert this number 4 hook, go right under the O-ring, wacky style. I throw it in the water. The bait has a lot of, it sinks, and as it's sinking, I pick it up a little bit and it just twitches but it's that slow fall could really tempt these fish. It doesn't look like a crayfish, but basically this color pattern we're using, it's got green pumpkin, I got some gold flakes in it, and it's basically imitating a crayfish pattern bait. But if this don't catch them on the river, if you can't catch at least one fish a day with this on the river, that's not a good sign. Another advantage to this O-ring, I can catch a lot of fish with the same bait. If I was just to take this and just hook this worm through the middle like a lot of guys do in their wacky style, that works good. But when you catch a fish, what usually happens is you break the worm apart. But the fact that it's on the O-ring, what'll happen is when I hook the fish, the worm slides up the hook like this. I let the fish go, and then I just take the worm, slide it back down, I'm ready to go again, and I can get sometimes 5 or 6 fish with one worm instead of just one worm per fish. If you're wondering how I got that O-ring onto this worm, Case Plastics, this is their own innovation here. What you do is you stick the 4-inch worm into the tube here, roll out the O-ring real nice, right on, O-ring strike set.
It's time for the discovering tip of the week.
There. Explain to you what I'm doing here, folks. Take a look how close I am to the shoreline. I'm only fishing in about 4 or 5 feet of water, and I'm not fishing for bedded bass. These fish have spawned probably 2 weeks ago, but the first impression is, why are you fishing so shallow? The secret is there's a lot of crayfish in these shallows. The crayfish are moving in heavy, and these big smallmouth like this are following them. Bright sunny days like this actually bring more crayfish into the shallows as they're feeding on the small little organisms and things that they're feeding on, and again the big smallmouth follow. Early summer smallmouth. I knew I'd get one on that topwater bait sooner or later. Especially when you make that cast right where it's supposed to be, right next to that shade by that log. Small fish, but we'll take them. Any fish you catch on a topwater bait is a good fish. Well, I've been fishing plastics. I tried jerk baits, I tried wacky worms. Normally that's my mainstay out there in the river. I wouldn't catch nothing with it. And all of a sudden I'm watching these fish come up and hit these dragonflies, and let's just say I wasn't born yesterday. I see any kind of surface activity, I switch to a surface bait. Yeah, it was alright. I'm glad them dragonflies start jumping, because now we're catching fish. Another topwater smallmouth on the Menominee River. Oh, beautiful! Oh! Oh! That is really neat when you're topwater. One thing when you watch them hit it, but when you see the fish coming a couple feet away, it comes a little closer, you twitch it and tease the fish in. That's what it's all about. I love it. 12 o'clock noon in the middle of the day. Who'd ever think you'd catch a fish with a topwater bait, huh? Only on the Menominee River. All these guys that get out here at 4 o'clock in the morning, fish like crazy for 3 hours and get skunked. I come out at 8:30, 9 o'clock and catch a boatload of fish. Oh! I want to have some fun. I might have to get my net out of here. Been there, done this before. Oh! I didn't need the net after all. I did. That's a quick release. I didn't want to stick my hand in that fish's mouth with these boatload of treble hooks anyway, huh? Bait I'm catching all these smallmouth today on the river. It's just a popping bait. But you notice, very important on this river, a couple of things. First of all, it's got the orange bottom. It doesn't matter if it's black or white on top. But on the Menominee River with this dark stained water, I like this orange bottom, very, very important. And another thing that's important, whenever you use a topwater bait, especially a popping bait, make sure it's got some hair on it. Because what happens is this bait, when I'm popping it, it drops and it sits vertically in the water. And when I'll just pop it a little bit, and this little hair on here, just a little teaser. I'll tell you, I think I catch probably 50% more fish by using a topwater bait that's got a trailer, some hair on it, than one that just has a plain treble hook. So we're fishing on the river here, orange bottom, and make sure you got some hair on your end treble hook.
Don't miss the Woodtick Music Festival in Hermansville, Michigan. 4 days of great bluegrass, country, folk, blues, and rock and roll. Over 25 bands. Fun for the entire family. Carry-ins welcome. Kids 12 and under free. Buy your tickets and campsites and find out everything you need to know online at woodtickfestival.com. That's woodtickfestival.com. The Woodtick Music Festival in Hermansville, Michigan.
Nothing more fun, folks, when you get one that comes right back, you hit, swings at it once. But I'll explain to you what I did to catch that fish in a minute as soon as we get him in a boat here. Pretty hard to beat the Menominee River in July. There we go. See this nice smallmouth? Let me tell you what I did. I was working the shoreline. I see a nice little log going into the water. Made the perfect cast. I popped that thing pretty fast. Fish come up, smucked it, turned on it, went back underneath the log. So I threw it right back, same bait. The difference I did this time was when I threw it out there, gave it a couple little short little twitch, short little twitch. This hair I was talking about before, that's what triggered that bait. If I wouldn't have had hair on that bait, I wouldn't have caught this fish. Nice, typical, probably about a 17.5-inch fish, Menominee River summer smallmouth.
It's time for the UP Outdoor Calendar. The 2013 UP Boat, Sport, and RV Show will be held March 22nd through the 24th at the Superior Dome in Marquette. While you're in Marquette, you might want to attend Dan Keating's Super Salmon Clinic at the Lakeview Arena. That takes place on Saturday the 23rd from 10 to 3 with a fishing gear swap meet afterwards. There are 2 season options for turkey hunters in the UP, Hunt 234 and Hunt 110. Hunt 234 opens May 6th and runs through May 31st. You can purchase a license for this hunt anytime between January 1st and May 1st. After May 1st, Hunt 234 licenses will be available only to those who applied. Hunt 110, which runs from April 22nd through May 31st, is a limited license hunt with a quota of 8,000 licenses available. After the initial drawing, there were 6,950 of the original 8,000 licenses left over. Hunters can purchase these leftover licenses beginning today, March 18th. You can purchase either of these licenses over the counter or online at mdnr-elicense.com. Full details on turkey hunting licenses and regulations can be found at michigan.gov/turkey. If there's something outdoor related happening in your area that you'd like folks to know about, let us know by visiting us at realoutdoorsup.com. It's time for Only in the UP, the segment of the show that highlights the friendly, creative, crafty, and inventive spirit of those of us who live here. It's about that stuff that makes the UP the greatest place on earth to live. What do you get when you mix malted barley, hops, yeast, and premium UP water? Some of the finest beer in the country. I paid a visit to the Keweenaw Brewing Company to find out what's involved.
I'm Paul Boissevain. My partner up here is Richard Gray. This whole brewery was sort of formulated in our past lives in Denver. We were both in the oil business in Denver for a number of years together. And we spent a fair amount of time drinking on the other side of a bar at a brew pub in Denver. Dick and his wife Stacy had both gone to school up here at Michigan Tech back in the late 70s, early 80s. Always wanted to return up here. It's their favorite part of the world. And we were at a stage in our careers where we were thinking about doing something new and different. And Dick broached the subject to me about coming up here and opening a brewery. So my wife and I came up and looked over the area and fell in love with it ourselves. So Dick and I jumped in with both feet. We bought a building downtown Houghton and started the brewery down there. We brought a brewer with us from Denver, Dave Lawrence, who was with us for about 3.5 years. He has since moved on. He's opened a restaurant in Houghton here, so he enjoys the area as well. So we were in downtown Houghton for 3 years, and then we realized we needed to expand dramatically. So we looked around and found a building here in South Range, added a significant amount of floor space to it, and then started filling it with all this stainless steel and plumbing that you see.
So when we're ready to start a brew day, we're going to take our malted barley that's stored out in silos or in our 50-pound bags. We're going to add it into the mill, crack open those kernels so that we can expose the starch inside. 1 pound per second goes through a series of augers, comes through some crushing rollers, and that gives us our crushed grain. Really just to crack the kernel open and move forward. From the mill, all the grain is augered up to end up with 50 barrels of beer, which is how much we brew at a time. We have to mill in roughly 3,000 pounds of crushed grain. From that scale, there's a white PVC pipe that has an internal auger that'll carry all of that crushed malt into our mash tun. And this is where we're going to add our hot liquor water from the hot liquor tank, hydrate the mash, heat it up, and make that starch to sugar conversion take place. So an hour and a half in of mashing, we've made a starch to sugar conversion. The mash is pumped into the lauter tun, which is where it's sitting right now. At this point, we're doing a brief rest before we start to strain that wort over to the brew kettle, where we'll start adding our hops and heating it up. So once we've taken all of that sugar water, strained it from the lauter tun to the brew kettle, at this point we'll add those hops. The hops are what act as a balance towards that malt sweetness. They add a little bit of bittering, some hoppy flavors. There's many different varieties of hops. We're using over 20 in this brewery alone, and it's up to us to decide, based on which style we're making, which hops go into the boil. We'll boil for 60 minutes for the bittering hops. We'll add some hops in the end for aroma and flavoring. So after the boiling of hops for 60 minutes in the brew kettle, we're going to pump the entire contents to the whirlpool. Now in the whirlpool, it's going to go into a giant spin straight off of the pump, and that spin will centrifugally separate out any of those hops that we don't want in the finished beer. The next step would be to cool the beer down so that we can pitch our yeast and start fermentation. So once the beer is run through the heat exchangers, we're going to hook up a beer line straight to the bottom of a fermenter where we're going to pitch that yeast culture and start fermentation. So this is Fermentation Alley. Each one of these beers is fermenting. Some have just begun to ferment. They're at high Kreuzen stage, very active, yeast feeding on sugars, creating CO2, creating ethanol. What we're going to do is let those fungus cells, the yeast, feed on the sugar at 70 degrees Fahrenheit for a week. That's going to take care of most of the sugar in the beer. Some will be left over, depending on which type we created it back in the mash tun. Now, after that's complete, we're going to chill down the fermenters. When the fermenter is cold, the yeast they're not going to be able to hold solution, and they'll fall all to the bottom of this cone. Once fermentation is complete, ultimately it's going to get filtered through this plate filter. The beer comes in. There's sandwich paper filters that grab any proteins, yeast, any solids, and this is really just to speed up the clarification of beer. Now this sample was taken directly out of a fermenter, and this is the same beer after it's gone through our coarse and fine filtering. And you can see large difference. what is actually being stripped out of the beer. From the plate filter, the beer is going to come into the bright tank. We'll take a CO2 line, plug it in, and behind the wall there'll be a large sintered stone, carbonation stone, that allows us to carbonate the beer over the course of 6 to 8 hours. We have a unit that allows us to test exactly how much CO2 volumes are in each beer, and we try to keep that as consistent as possible. Once we have a finished product, a finished beer in a bright tank, we wait for our orders. Some of the beer will go into half-barrel kegs, others will go into quarter-barrel kegs, and the rest of it will go into our 6-packs to the canning line. So the empty shells come across the conveyor line. The first 5 fingers actually purge any oxygen out of the can. The second set of 10 are actually injecting the beer from the bottom up. Filled cans will come across. A lid dispenser will actually set a lid independently on top of the filled can of beer. The beers are pushed into a 2-stage seaming process. The first wheel will actually make the seal, and the second is more for aesthetics.
When we opened, we consciously made the decision to go to cans. Up here in the UP, everything is an outdoor activity. We didn't want people not taking our beer because they were going out to the beach or on a boat or out fishing. So we went with cans, thinking it'd be a much better container for up here. Additionally, the can makes a much better container for beer in that it does not let light in. The aluminum's a better product to recycle back into another can. It ships better than bottles. It's about 60% the weight of bottles, and it takes up less space. It's a more economic container for moving the beer around the country.
And both inside of this shell and underneath this lid is spray filmed with a poly resin, so that beer should never make any contact with the aluminum for imparting a metallic taste. That's one very important thing to understand about the canned beverage.
We've grown from initially 400 barrels of beer our first year that we were open to a little over 8,000 barrels this year. So we're growing dramatically. Between the bar and up here, we've got 19 employees now. Right now we're in Michigan, Wisconsin, and just got into Minnesota this year. About 65% of our production goes to the UP right now. Most of the rest of it is going downstate. We're hoping to get more across Wisconsin this year and expand perhaps into Ohio as well.
Well, that's it for this week. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week right here on Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.